The autumn wind swept through the grounds of Balmoral Castle as Charles stood by the large window in his private study. His hands trembled slightly as he held the letter that had arrived that morning. The royal seal was broken, but the words inside felt heavier than any crown he would ever wear. William had written to him. After months of cold silence and formal interactions, his eldest son had finally reached out. But this was not the reconciliation Charles had hoped for. Instead, it was an ultimatum. "Father," the letter began, "we need to talk about what really happened during those years when Mother was still alive. The family deserves the truth, and I deserve to know why certain decisions were made that affected all of us." Charles set the letter down and walked to his desk. The mahogany surface was cluttered with official papers, but hidden beneath them was a small, locked drawer. Inside that drawer lay secrets that had been buried for decades, secrets that Camilla had made him promise never to reveal. The relationship between Charles and Camilla had begun long before the public knew about it. Even before he married Diana, there had been something between them that neither could fully explain. But what the world didn't know was that their connection had deeper roots than anyone imagined. In 1970, when Charles was just 22, he had met Camilla at a polo match. She was young, confident, and unlike any woman he had ever encountered. She didn't treat him like a prince. She treated him like a person. That afternoon, as they sat by the horses, sharing stories and laughing, Charles felt something he had never experienced before. Freedom. But duty called, and Charles was sent away for naval training. During those months apart, Camilla married Andrew Parker Bowles. When Charles returned, he was devastated, not just because he had lost her, but because he realized that royal duty would always come before personal happiness. Years passed. Charles married Diana in what the world called a fairy tale wedding. The crowds cheered. The bells rang. And for a moment, Charles believed he could be happy. Diana was beautiful, kind, and genuinely loved him. But the shadow of Camilla never fully disappeared. What Charles had never told anyone, not even his closest friends, was that Camilla had written to him just days before his wedding to Diana. The letter was brief but devastating. She told him that her marriage to Andrew was not what it seemed. She explained that she had married Andrew not out of love, but out of desperation. She had discovered something about her family's financial situation that would have ruined them if she hadn't married quickly. The truth was that Camilla's father had been involved in some questionable business dealings. Nothing criminal, but enough to embarrass the family and potentially damage Charles's reputation if their relationship had become public at that time. Camilla had sacrificed her own happiness to protect Charles's future as king. Charles had kept that letter hidden for decades. He had never told Diana about it because he didn't want to hurt her with the knowledge that his heart had always been divided. He had tried to be a good husband, and for several years, he had been genuinely happy with Diana. William and Harry were born, and Charles thought he had found peace with his choices. But as Diana grew more independent and began to understand the complexities of royal life, she started asking questions. She noticed the way Charles would sometimes stare out of windows with a distant look. She saw how he would receive certain phone calls and become quiet for days afterward. Diana was not naive. She knew there were things her husband was not telling her. The breaking point came in 1986, when Diana accidentally discovered one of Camilla's old letters in Charles's private study. The letter didn't say anything inappropriate, but it was clear that there was an emotional connection between them that went beyond friendship. Diana confronted Charles that night, and for the first time in their marriage, he was completely honest with her. He told her about the letter Camilla had sent before their wedding. He explained about the financial troubles and the sacrifice Camilla had made. He admitted that he had never stopped caring for Camilla, but he insisted that he was committed to making their marriage work. Diana listened in silence. When Charles finished speaking, she did something that surprised him. She didn't get angry. Instead, she asked him a simple question. "Do you love me?" Charles looked at his wife, the mother of his children, the woman who had given up her freedom to be his princess. He wanted to say yes. He tried to say yes, but the words wouldn't come. Diana nodded slowly. I thought so, she said quietly. Charles, I won't be the woman who stands in the way of true love. But I also won't be the woman who pretends everything is fine when it's not. We need to figure out what we're going to do. That conversation changed everything. For the next few years, Charles and Diana tried to maintain their marriage while privately acknowledging that it was built on a foundation that was not entirely solid. They went to counseling. They took trips together. They tried to rebuild what had been damaged. But the harder they tried, the more they both realized that some things cannot be fixed simply through effort. Charles loved Diana, but he was not in love with her the way she deserved to be loved. Diana cared for Charles, but she could not compete with a ghost from his past. Meanwhile, Camilla watched from a distance. She had remarried after her divorce from Andrew. But her new marriage was also struggling. The weight of the secret she had carried for so many years was beginning to take its toll on her mental health. She had sacrificed her chance at happiness with Charles to protect him, but in doing so, she had also contributed to the unhappiness of his marriage to Diana. In 1989, Camilla made a decision that would change everything. She decided to tell Andrew Parker Bowles the truth about why she had married him. She explained about her father's financial troubles and about her feelings for Charles. Andrew was devastated, but he was also relieved. He had always sensed that Camilla's heart was elsewhere, and finally understanding why helped him make sense of their troubled marriage. Andrew agreed to keep the secret, but he also asked for a divorce. He deserved to be with someone who loved him completely, and Camilla deserved to stop living a lie. The divorce proceedings were quiet and dignified. The public assumed it was simply another aristocratic marriage that had run its course. But for Charles, Camilla's divorce represented something much more significant. It meant that for the first time in nearly 20 years, both of them were free to make their own choices. Charles had been thinking about that day when William's letter arrived. His son was now old enough to understand the complexities of adult relationships. William had watched his parents' marriage fall apart, and he had seen how the constant media attention had affected everyone in the family. But William had never known the full story of why his parents had struggled so much. Now, as Charles prepared to respond to his son's letter, he realized that the time for secrets was coming to an end. William deserved to know the truth, not just about the breakdown of his parents' marriage, but about the impossible choices that had shaped all of their lives. Charles picked up his pen and began to write. "My dear William," he started, "you are right. It is time we talked. There are things about our family's history that you need to understand. But I warn you, the truth is more complicated than you might expect." As he wrote, Charles thought about Camilla, who was probably in her own study at this very moment, preparing for the conversation she had dreaded for decades. The conversation where she would finally have to explain to William and Harry why she had made the choices she made, and why sometimes protecting the people you love requires sacrifices that nobody else can understand. The letter Charles was writing to William was not just an invitation to talk. It was an invitation to understand that love, duty, and sacrifice are often impossibly intertwined, and that sometimes the people who seem like villains in a story are actually the ones who have made the greatest sacrifices of all. The meeting was set for the following Tuesday at Clarence's house. William arrived early, something he had always done since childhood when he was nervous. Charles watched from the upstairs window as his son walked up the path, noting how William's posture was rigid with tension. This conversation had been years in the making, and both men knew that their relationship would never be the same afterward. Camilla had insisted on being present for the discussion. "I won't hide behind Charles anymore," she had told him the night before. "William deserves to hear directly from me why I made the choices I made. He deserves to understand that his mother was not a victim of some grand conspiracy, but rather a woman caught in an impossible situation." When William entered the sitting room, he was surprised to find Camilla already there, sitting quietly by the fireplace. She looked older than he remembered, and for the first time, he noticed the sadness in her eyes that she usually kept hidden behind her public smile. "Thank you for coming," Charles said, gesturing for William to take a seat. "I know this is difficult for all of us." William remained standing. "Father, before we begin, I need you to know that Harry and I have been talking. We both have questions that we've never had answered. We both remember things from our childhood that never made sense until now. Camilla looked up at William with genuine curiosity. What kind of things? William hesitated for a moment, then decided to be direct. I remember the summer when I was 12. Mother had been acting strangely for weeks, spending a lot of time on the phone and seeming upset about something. Then one day, she sat Harry and me down and told us that there might be changes coming to our family. She said that sometimes adults make mistakes, but that doesn't mean they love their children any less. Charles felt his chest tighten. He remembered that summer well. It was when Diana had discovered the letters. That was also the summer when you started spending more time away from home, William continued, looking directly at his father. You would leave for days at a time, saying you had official business. But even as a child, I could tell that something else was going on. Camilla spoke softly. That was when your father and I reconnected after many years of no contact. What do you mean, no contact? William asked, sitting down for the first time since entering the room. Charles took a deep breath. William, what I'm about to tell you may change how you see everything that happened between your mother and me. Camilla and I had not spoken to each other for almost 7 years when we met again in 1986. This was news to William. The media had always portrayed Charles and Camilla as having an ongoing affair throughout his marriage to Diana, but the truth was much more complex. Camilla leaned forward in her chair. When your father married your mother, I made a decision to completely remove myself from his life. I changed my phone number. I moved away from areas where I might accidentally encounter him. And I asked all our mutual friends not to update me on his life, or update him on mine. Why? William asked. Because I knew that if I remained in his life in any way, it would be unfair to your mother. Diana deserved a husband who was completely present in their marriage, not one who was distracted by memories of someone else. Charles added, for those 7 years, I genuinely tried to make my marriage to your mother work without any outside interference. I focused on being a husband and a father. Some of my happiest memories are from those years when you and Harry were young. William processed this information. But something changed in 1986. Your mother was becoming increasingly interested in charity work, Charles continued. Specifically, work with families affected by divorce. She was visiting counseling centers and talking to children whose parents had separated. One day, she came home and asked me directly if I was truly happy in our marriage. This was a part of the story that William had never heard before. In all the interviews and documentaries about his parents' divorce, no one had ever mentioned that it was Diana who first questioned the state of their marriage. Camilla's voice was barely above a whisper. Diana was more perceptive than anyone gave her credit for. She could see that Charles was trying very hard to be something he wasn't, not because he didn't love her, but because he was forcing himself to ignore a part of his heart that had never healed. So, what happened? William asked. Charles stood up and walked to the window. Your mother asked me to be completely honest with her about my feelings. She said she would rather know the truth and deal with it than continue living with uncertainty. So I told her about Camilla, about the feelings I had never fully resolved. And how did she react? She cried, Camilla said quietly. But she also said something that I will never forget. She said that she would rather be divorced from a man who was honest about his feelings than married to a man who was pretending to feel something he didn't. William was stunned. This version of his mother was different from the victim narrative he had grown up believing. This Diana was strong, direct, and unwilling to accept a situation that wasn't genuine. That's when your mother suggested that I contact Camilla, Charles continued. She said that we all deserved to understand what we were really dealing with. She wanted to know if my feelings for Camilla were based on memory and nostalgia, or if they were something real that needed to be addressed. Mother suggested that you contact Camilla? William repeated, trying to process this information. She did, Camilla confirmed. And when Charles called me, I was terrified. Not because I didn't want to see him, but because I knew that seeing him would force me to confront feelings I had been trying to ignore for years. William learned that the first meeting between Charles and Camilla after their 7-year separation had taken place in a small cafe in London, far from anywhere they might be recognized. Diana had actually driven Charles to the meeting. Your mother waited in the car while Charles and I talked, Camilla explained. We sat in that cafe for 3 hours, and by the end of the conversation, we both knew that our feelings for each other had not diminished. If anything, the years apart had made us both realize how much we had lost when we let duty separate us. What did Mother say when she found out? William asked. Charles returned to his chair. She was devastated, but she was also relieved. She said that finally understanding what she was competing with made her feel less like she was failing as a wife, and more like she was dealing with an impossible situation. The conversation continued for several more hours. William learned that his parents had spent the next year trying to figure out what to do with this new information. They had gone to counseling together. They had taken a second honeymoon. They had genuinely tried to rebuild their marriage with complete honesty between them, but the more honest they became with each other, the more they realized that honesty alone was not enough to create the kind of love that Diana deserved and that Charles was capable of giving. The decision to separate was mutual, Charles explained. Your mother and I both agreed that we could either continue in a marriage that was based on duty and friendship, or we could end the marriage and give each other the chance to find the kind of love we both deserved. William was quiet for a long time, processing everything he had learned. Finally, he looked at Camilla and asked the question he had been building up to all afternoon. Camilla, did you feel guilty about my mother's death? Camilla's composure finally broke. Tears streamed down her face as she answered. Every single day. Even though I know rationally that the car accident was not caused by anything I did, I still feel responsible for the chain of events that led to Diana being in Paris that night. If Charles and I had never reconnected, if we had both just accepted our situations and moved on, Diana might still be alive. But do you think Mother would have been happy? William asked. This question surprised Camilla. She had expected anger from William, not empathy. I don't know, Camilla answered honestly. But I think she would have been alive, and that's what matters. William stood up and walked over to where Camilla was sitting. To her surprise, he knelt down beside her chair. Camilla, he said gently, I need you to understand something. Harry and I have spent years trying to figure out why our parents' marriage ended. We've read every article, watched every documentary, and listened to every theory. But what you've told me today is the first explanation that actually makes sense of what we observed as children. Camilla looked at him through her tears. What do you mean? We remember Mother being sad. But we also remember her being strong. We remember her fighting for what she believed in, not just accepting whatever happened to her. The woman you've described today sounds like the mother we remember, not the victim the media portrayed. Charles watched this exchange with amazement. His son was demonstrating a maturity and understanding that went beyond what Charles had expected. William continued, I'm not saying I'm ready to forget about all the pain our family went through, but I am saying that I'm ready to understand it differently, and I think Mother would want us to understand it honestly, even if the truth is complicated. As the afternoon sun began to set through the windows of Clarence's house, 3 people who had been carrying secrets for decades finally began to understand that the truth, however painful, was the only foundation upon which they could build a genuine relationship going forward. 6 months after that life-changing conversation at Clarence's house, William found himself standing in the same spot where his mother had once stood before her wedding day. The irony was not lost on him as he adjusted his own wedding attire, preparing for his marriage to Catherine. But unlike the uncertainty that had clouded his parents' wedding day, William felt a clarity that came from finally understanding the true story of his family. Charles entered the room quietly, carrying a small wooden box that William had never seen before. The relationship between father and son had transformed dramatically since their honest conversation with Camilla. Where there had once been polite distance, there was now genuine intimacy built on truth rather than royal protocol. I have something for you, Charles said, holding out the box. Something I should have given you years ago, but I wasn't ready to explain its significance. William opened the box to find a simple gold ring with an inscription inside, True Love Waits. His father explained that it had been his grandfather's wedding ring, given to him by his grandmother on her deathbed with specific instructions. She told me to give this ring to the first person in our family who was brave enough to marry for love rather than duty. Charles said. "I thought it would be me, but I wasn't brave enough when my time came. You are." As William slipped the ring onto his finger, he realized that his father was giving him something more valuable than a family heirloom. He was giving him permission to make different choices, to prioritize love over expectation, and to build a marriage on the foundation of honesty that his parents had discovered too late. The wedding ceremony was magnificent, but what struck everyone who attended was the genuine joy radiating from both William and Catherine. Charles watched from the front row, with Camilla beside him, and for the first time in decades, he felt at peace with the choices he had made. The path had been painful, but it had led to this moment where his son was free to choose love without the burden of secrets and half-truths. After the ceremony, during the private family reception, William made an unexpected speech. Instead of the traditional thanks to the guests and celebration of his new bride, he spoke directly about the importance of honesty in relationships. "Today, Catherine and I are beginning our marriage with complete transparency between us," he said, looking directly at his father and Camilla. "We've learned from the experiences of those who came before us that love cannot survive in an environment of secrets and unfulfilled obligations. We choose to build our life together on truth, even when that truth is complicated." The guests applauded, but William continued. "I also want to acknowledge that sometimes the people who love us most make choices that seem wrong from the outside, but are actually acts of sacrifice. I've learned that judging someone's choices without understanding their circumstances is not just unfair, it's impossible." Camilla felt tears in her eyes as she realized that William was publicly acknowledging her role in the family's story without condemning her for it. This was more acceptance than she had ever dared to hope for. Later that evening, as the celebration continued, Harry pulled William aside for a private conversation. The brothers had grown closer since William's conversation with their father and Camilla, united by their new understanding of their parents' story. "Do you think Mother would be proud of how this turned out?" Harry asked, watching Catherine laughing with the other guests. William considered the question carefully. "I think Mother would be proud that we finally know the truth. I think she would be proud that we're choosing to build relationships based on honesty rather than pretense. And I think she would be proud that we're not repeating the mistakes of the past." What William didn't know was that Diana had actually left letters for both of her sons to be given to them on their wedding days. Charles had kept these letters private for years, unsure of when the right time would be to share them. But after the transformation in his relationship with William, he decided that tonight was the right moment. The letter to William was remarkable in its wisdom and prescience. Diana had written it just months before her death, during a time when she had gained clarity about her own life and her hopes for her sons' futures. "My dearest William," the letter began. "If you are reading this, it means you are about to marry someone you truly love. I hope that your path to this moment has been clearer than mine was. I want you to know that the difficulties your father and I experienced were not failures of love, but failures of timing and circumstance. We both loved deeply, but we were not able to love each other in the way that marriage requires." The letter continued with Diana's reflections on her own growth and understanding. She wrote about forgiveness, about the difference between romantic love and deep caring, and about her hopes that her sons would be brave enough to choose authentic relationships over convenient ones. "I have learned that sometimes loving someone means letting them be happy with someone else," Diana wrote. "I hope that by the time you read this, our family has found a way to heal from the pain we all experienced. I hope that you understand that there were no villains in our story, only people trying to balance love and duty in an impossible situation." The most surprising part of the letter was Diana's message about Camilla. "Your father's relationship with Camilla was not a betrayal of our marriage, but rather evidence of a connection that existed before I entered the picture. I have come to understand that fighting against that connection would have been like fighting against the tide. Instead, I choose to be grateful for the love I was able to experience, and to wish them both happiness." William read the letter 3 times before showing it to Catherine and Harry. Diana's words provided a final piece of understanding that completed the picture of his family's story. His mother had not died angry or bitter, but rather with a wisdom that came from accepting the complexities of love and relationships. Over the following years, as William and Catherine built their own family, the lessons learned from his parents' experiences became even more valuable. When they faced difficulties in their own marriage, They had the tools of honesty and communication that his parents had discovered too late. When they disagreed about important decisions, they remembered that love requires both passion and choice. Charles and Camilla's relationship also evolved in the years following William's wedding. Free from the burden of secrecy and family disapproval, they were able to build a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection. They never tried to replace Diana in the boys' lives, but rather created a new kind of family dynamic that honored the past while embracing the present. The turning point came when Harry also married, choosing Meghan despite the controversies and complications her background brought to the royal family. William watched his father support Harry's choice completely, even when it would have been easier to counsel caution. "Love is not always convenient," Charles told the family during a private dinner before Harry's wedding. "But it is always worth fighting for, even when the fight is difficult." As the years passed, William often reflected on the conversation that had changed everything. He realized that the moment Charles reached for him with honesty and vulnerability had been the beginning of their real relationship as father and son. The secrets Camilla had hidden for decades had not been acts of deception, but acts of love. Complicated, imperfect, but ultimately selfless attempts to protect the people she cared about. The story of his family had taught William that love comes in many forms. There is the passionate love that exists between romantic partners, but there is also the love that chooses sacrifice over self-interest. The love that forgives when forgiveness seems impossible, and the love that accepts truth even when that truth is painful. On quiet evenings, when William tucked his own children into bed, he sometimes told them stories about their grandmother Diana and their step-grandmother Camilla. He explained that families are complicated, that adults sometimes make mistakes, but that love always finds a way to heal and grow. His children would ask him what the most important lesson was from all these family stories. William would always give them the same answer. The most important lesson is that love requires courage. The courage to be honest, the courage to forgive, and the courage to choose each other every day, even when it's difficult. The moment Charles reached for William with truth instead of protection had revealed that the secrets Camilla hid were not acts of betrayal, but acts of love. And in understanding that truth, William had learned that the strongest families are not those that avoid difficulties, but those that face difficulties together with honesty, forgiveness, and hope. 20 years after that conversation at Clarence House, William would often look at his father and Camilla together and see not the couple who had caused his mother pain, but the couple who had taught him that love, in all its forms, requires both courage and compassion. The story had no perfect characters, but it had something better. Real people who had learned to choose love over fear, truth over comfort, and healing over blame. And in the end, that had made all the difference.